Hey everyone, so in today's video I'm doing a digital illustration which is planning for my upcoming oil painting. If you didn't see my last video, it was an oil painting supply haul and I said I was going to start on an oil painting right away, which was dumb timing because I have a convention coming up this weekend, and so it's that final week where I'm prepping hard for the convention and I'm doing an oil painting too, I thought, which was dumb. But I figured I had to plan it out first. So I wanted some kind of digital illustration where it was pretty much a finished digital illustration so I could really have everything planned out. Like, I wanted a sketch that was clean enough to transfer onto the board I'm using, and I wanted the colors all planned out so that I could easily just look at my finished digital painting as a reference and mix the colors I need and go with that. And it took a lot for me to figure out what I was even going to draw for this. There's a bunch of sketching that's not even included in this video from a previous day where I was just trying to come up with something, couldn't think of anything, and then I started all these sketches and it went through many phases, from a girl reading a book to a girl trying to pipe some icing to other things. Well, it ended up being just a girl putting the cherry on a cupcake, but I was trying all kinds of things, and what I was actually inspired by eventually, after that day where I could not figure out what to draw, I was looking through my Art of Frozen art book, and at the very back there is an illustration by Corey Loftus, and when I saw that I was just suddenly inspired. It's like something just clicked and I was like, I want to do an illustration based off this. But I saw that picture before I started all the sketching that you see in this video, so I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to draw, like what the subject matter would be, but I knew I wanted it to have a very similar color scheme to this illustration by Corey, and I wanted it to be a similar composition where it's light in the middle, there's a character in the middle, and then it gets darker and more bluish on the outside. So like pink and peachy in the middle, then purpley blue around it. That's why I blocked in that color in the background right off the bat and then started sketching, because I thought maybe having that visual representation of the composition would help me think of something. And so eventually I settled on this, and once I got to this pose, I was still struggling because this is one of those days where you're drawing and you just cannot come up with anything, slash you do come up with something and you just can't get the lines right. You're erasing constantly, trying to get it perfect. That was me this day. Like, some days it just works out and I can sketch quickly. This was one of those days where I spent hours and hours just on this sketch because I was being so nitpicky and I really wanted it to be right. And boy, I spent forever on those hands. I redrew them so many times. I actually sped up the footage of the hand portions to be extra fast because I was like, this is taking too long. This is making the video too long. I had so many pictures on my phone of my hands. I was taking pictures of the angle I wanted and drawing it from there, but even with my own hands as reference, I was still struggling to get them to look nice, and I don't want it to look exactly like my hand. They're kind of like pudgy and wrinkly, and I wanted them to look all dainty and cute, and so it took a while, but I eventually got the hands the way I wanted them. It also didn't help that I didn't have the pose solidified for the body and the hands. Like, I was just winging it. I didn't really know what I wanted, and so there was a lot of trial and error, a lot of redrawing, and then finally I got it figured out. By the way, I am sketching this on my iPad Pro. I have the second generation 12.9 inch, and I'm using Procreate as my program, which is a fantastic program, and it's super cheap. It's like $10 or something, and it's fantastic. For her face, I went for mostly my usual style with the big round ears, and the eyes are pretty similar, except I made them a little squintier to give her more emotion. Instead of just being kind of wide-eyed happy, it's more like a peaceful, squinty-eyed smile, because when you smile, your eyes kind of scrunch up, and so I really wanted that look. And then I was inspired by Frozen once again for the lips. It has those thin Frozen-esque lips, because that was the main inspiration for this art. Then I was playing around with some different hairstyles. I think it's actually really interesting I included all this footage of the planning, because it just goes to show that there's a lot of trial and error with art. You don't always just sketch things perfectly the first time. Sometimes you don't even know what you want, and so you're just exploring, trying to find what you want. This is another reason why I wanted this really fleshed out before I even moved to the painting, because I've tried that in the past where I just sit down and start painting and hope that it turns out right, and then it just becomes a big mess. And so that's why I wanted this really, really planned out before even starting the oil painting. You're probably also thinking this is kind of a weird subject matter / style to do as an oil painting because it's cartoony. When you think oil paintings, a lot of the times you think realism, but I don't know. I just want to do something different. I'm not a realism artist. And so I do cartoony stuff, but I still like oil painting, and so I'm merging the two even though it's unconventional. I do wonder how I will translate it to oil, like how much of the outlines I'll keep, because I do still want there to kind of be outlines on everything. I was reducing opacity and playing around with the lines in this, and I was like, oh, I just need the lines. I need the lines. So it's going to be it'll be interesting. It'll be weird to have an illustration like this done as an oil painting. I also have the fear that the oil painting will mega suck compared to this, especially with the brightness of the colors. I'm like, can I get that bright with my oils? I did buy those radiant colors, which are super vibrant, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm really curious to see how the digital painting compares to the oil one. And so I think that'll actually be really neat once I get the oil video done, because we can compare and see how they compare. That's a bad sentence. That's also a bad sentence. I was trying to think of what I could fill the scene with, because I knew I wanted the character to be in a setting doing some kind of task. So once I figured out, okay, she's a baker, and once I decided against the icing piping and went with the cupcake thing, I thought, okay, well, she's got a cupcake and she's got a cherry, so there has to be other cherries and other cupcakes here in the scene. I also included a big bowl, which is supposed to be for the icing that she puts on the cupcakes, and I have sprinkles on them, so I included a little can of sprinkles as well. And then for everything else, I decided to add books because it makes sense to have cookbooks, and because, like you saw earlier in the video, I was thinking of illustrating someone who was sitting and reading, and so the idea of having books in the foreground was still on my mind, so I included that. I wanted some kind of plants, but didn't want it to copy too much the Frozen illustration, and so I thought, okay, we can have a potted plant in the front corner that's like a fern, and then we can have some kind of hanging, drooping plant in the opposite corner. And then for the other corner, the top left, I initially drew a bird cage, and then I erased that and ended up hanging some aprons because I wanted something that went off frame, which the cage didn't really, and I just thought, for this first oil painting, I don't really want to have a cage. I think I might just make it look too messy if I try to paint a cage, so I went with aprons instead, and I think the aprons make more sense anyway. Maybe she just likes to have different aprons. Maybe she bakes a lot and she just has a different apron for every mood. You'll also notice I warmed up the background colors. I was constantly tweaking them throughout because initially I had it way too cold and way too purple. Mine does look more peachy in the middle compared to the Frozen illustration, because in that one, everything goes from dark on the outside to light on the inside, and the characters are the lightest thing in the picture. But with mine, I thought it'd be cool if the background right behind the character was the lightest thing, but then she was darker to contrast with the light, and so it's a little bit different, and so there's more of that light orangey color. Something I also had to keep in mind with this is that there is a light orange light source coming from, well, her left, our right, and so that's causing shadows to appear on the left-hand side of the painting, but there's also that darkness around the edge. So it was hard to think in my mind, like, okay, the lighting's coming from this side, but as we get to this side of the painting, there's also just shadows because it's darker in general around the edges, and it was a lot to keep in mind. So for the character and the mid-ground elements, the lighting is more dependent on that orange lighting, but then for things that are purple in the scene, like the foreground and background, those things, the shading is more dependent on that dark outer edge. So if you look at the hanging pot plant, the shadows are on the right-hand side, but if you look at her icing bowl, the shadows are on the left-hand side. Although at this point I didn't quite shade it yet, but yes. I'm gonna try my best to get the actual cherry to pop. Ooh. I mean, like, visually the cherry blends in a little bit with her apron, and so when I do the painting I want to try to maybe shade behind the cherry a little bit so that it pops a little more, because it's red on pink and so it's not that noticeable, although the cherry's not really the focal point. I feel like her face is, and then your eye's supposed to lead down to what she's doing and then you see the cherry. So I don't know, that's something I want to keep in mind when I actually do it, because when I had that original idea of her piping icing, I was trying to draw it in such a way that it had a clear silhouette and you could really see what she was doing, but it was just getting to be too extreme, like, and awkward, holding it way out there, and I thought it was more natural for it to just be right in front of her, and that's when I thought of the cherry pose idea. So yeah, it's not the best silhouette, but it's still cute. And I think it still works. You'd have no idea what she was doing if you just saw her completely in black, like a black silhouette, but it's fine. I mostly fleshed out her and the midground elements. The plants and books and stuff I didn't flesh out as much, and with the plants you can see it's extra lazy because I didn't want to spend too much time on it, since that's something I don't need to have clear lines for when I go to do it in paint. With her, I want super precise lines so I can capture her essence exactly as I did it digitally, but for the plants I'm just going to be going in with dark paint and then gradually lightening my layers, and so I didn't really need to focus on that too much in the digital painting. For the aprons, I just made sure that the colors went from darkest to the left to lightest towards the middle so that it would match that overall lighting in the picture. And I guess that is it. This is my illustration. I honestly think it's one of the best pieces of art I've ever done. It might actually be the best art that I've ever done. It's not super clean or finished or polished, but it's just nice in terms of lighting and composition. I like it. I'm really proud of this so far, so hopefully I can do it justice in the actual oil painting. But yes, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to be at Fan Expo Vancouver this weekend, so if you're in the neighborhood, come say hi. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.